Hey everyone, today I wanted to host an interesting discussion topic regarding the next mainline Monster Hunter game, whether it is Monster Hunter 6, Monster Hunter World 2, Monster Hunter Paradise, or whatever they officially end up naming it. And specifically, I wanted to talk about and certainly open up the discussion and let me know in the comments what it is that you want to see come back. But essentially, 10 main mechanics that need to return to the mainline franchise. These would essentially be known as features for other games, but just at the end of the day, mechanics are things that have fundamentally changed the franchise, either for the better or for the worst. Something that players can either hang on to, like the Clutch Claw, for example, in Monster Hunter World, or Iceborne, or Palamutes for Monster Hunter Rise and Sunbreak. These are things that are deal breakers now for some players that they would hate to have to go back to and not ever want to see again. Something that could be, for example, not making this list of things that we definitely need to come back would be something along the lines of like spirit birds. Spirit birds are very divisive discussion topics because some players just want to be able to eat, to be able to get the maxed out stamina, the maxed out health, and be able to just be done with that. Whereas some players are okay with just taking a little bit of a detour, maybe eating specifically for spirit bird buffs, and they don't necessarily mind them or see them much of a problem. But these would not be, because they're a little bit divisive at the end of the day, this would be something that wouldn't necessarily crack this top 10 list. Instead, we're going to be talking about things that I think are universally liked, unlike the Rampage, and therefore could potentially be making the cut. And I'm also going to give a huge shout out to Jacob H. Buchalter over at Game Rant for putting up this really interesting discussion topic that I certainly wanted to bring over to my audience. And without further delay, the first thing that they talk about, number 10, we're going to work our way from number 10 to number 1. It would be improved underwater combat or something similar. They mentioned that, let's get to the most controversial inclusion out of the way. The underwater combat for Monster Hunter Tri or Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, the system was heavily flawed with the inclusion of these games, no doubt about it. But it also had a whole new dimension of combat in Monster Hunter. The sheer fact that they tried and for the most part the combat was functional was absolutely worth praising. And it's worth noticing that even 10 plus years later, there's often threads or posts that pop up on multiple Monster Hunter related sites where fans and mechanics talk about wanting it to come back. Capcom has 3 options with these positive results. They can ignore in the interest of underwater combat within the past that they've done up until now. They can introduce a whole new massively introduced underwater combat system, and of course the return of Lagiacrus, of course, coming back. Laggy would be probably kind of like a mission that they kind of need underwater in order to be able to have it, even though it really that's not the case. We saw that in Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate. And lastly, or they can create a biome-centric combat system similar to underwater combat, such as full flying combat, chase-related combat, or even something like sand surfing combat in the desert biome. So I'm going to disregard the last one because that includes the most amount of work, and I don't think Capcom is ready to do a heck of a lot of work. Now for me personally, because I do think that the next mainline game will be building upon Monster Hunter World and the physics that they created for that game and just the visual style of that game, I think they're going to continue that trend going forward. This is why I always say Monster Hunter World 2 is probably more realistic than people actually expect it to be. And I think introducing underwater combat to that type of game, specifically in the way that they handled it with the Clutch Claw, for you to be able to make a monster come closer to you or you closer to it, introducing some of the ideas that we're going to be touching upon later in this list, and like the wire bug or whatever, something underwater, wire bug related, something along those lines would make underwater combat a little bit better. Now, one of the biggest things that they need to do is, of course, speed it up. It was heavily slow. It was a little bit cumbersome, like this article specifically mentions, and that is something that they need to speed up. But for those, kind of like classic Monster Hunter players that certainly want to see something make its way back into the game, this one would be a foregone conclusion that they're going to buy the game on day 1. Number 9 in their official list is the investigation hunts. The investigation quest and system in Monster Hunter World is something that Monster Hunter Rise sorely needed, and it's something that Monster Hunter 6 should probably absolutely have. I would actually argue that in general, I believe anomaly investigations do a much better job than investigation hunts, but fair enough. The system makes grinding for specific monster drops a lot less tedious thanks to the rarity system, guaranteed drops denoted from bronze, silver to gold boxes in the reward sections. Additionally, each quest can be a capture, kill, or collect quest included in a slew of extra variables that made it so not investigations played the game. Of course, the system wasn't perfect, and anomaly quests in Sunbreak do in a way fill the same role, but similar systems would absolutely be beloved by the fan base in the next iterations. And I think at the end of the day, anomaly investigations are an improvement to investigation hunts. I think that they are just better at the end of the day. Now, the grind is a little bit completely unnecessary. I wouldn't want them to replicate that going forward, but I would like to see them integrate, recall them, whatever it is that you want. You don't have to call them anomaly investigation quests. We didn't even expect curios to appear in the next mainline game, but it would be interesting for them to improve on those going forward. Number 8, they mention monster tracking and general ecology, and for me, this one specifically would probably be much higher in the list. This is another controversial pick, as it seems like it's truly a 50-50 argument between the community and about whether Monster Hunter tracking for Monster Hunter World should come back or not. I disagree. I think I've seen a lot of people be very optimistic and hoping that this actually does get brought back, and one of the downsides that they have seen for Rise and Sunbreak is the lack of tracking. Half of the community feels like the system was tedious, slowed down every single hunt, and was made so there was never a moment for those brightly growing scout flies weren't on the screen directly at getting the player's attention. Meanwhile, the other half of the community feels as though the system was added a ton of immersion in the Monster Hunter world, made it actually feel like they were hunting a monster by tracking it down first, and naturally help players explore and get used to the map over time, and I completely agree. If they bring the system back, a good middle ground solution would be to keep it mostly the same, but simply require fewer interactables to actually pin down the monster's location. Now, for me personally, I would be completely fine with them bringing this system back, with the understanding that at the very least, you can opt into it, so it will be one of those things where, like, if you're tracking or you're just getting like samples or whatever, maybe you get better rewards. We already have that in Sunbreak with, collecting those red anomaly investigation drops. You get more quests by being able to do that, so certainly rewarding players to be able to gather and maybe track monsters a little bit more will go a long way. Maybe get more points, get more anomaly grind, whatever, if they end up calling that same system in the next game, will certainly be a much better option. Number 7, according to the article, is followers and the follower system. The followers were added in Sunbreak are a gigantic expansion to Monster Hunter Rise that parallels what Iceborne added in Monster Hunter World, and is one of the best new systems Capcom has introduced in a long time. Previously, it felt that the Monster Hunter players who didn't have a group of friends that also played the game, didn't have a best internet, had to roll the dice with random lobbies or deal with the monotony added in difficulty hunting alone. But with the follower systems, players can add and bring their favorite NPCs into missions, and with them, those NPCs pull the monsters aggro and just generally have an easier time hunting overall. The only problem with that, and would hopefully be addressed if they brought it back, is that it was a single player only experience. If they bring followers back, simply make it so that online, when someone joins the lobby, one of the followers disappears as a result, and I completely agree. Make followers available in online hunts, so if you're starting a hunt by yourself, and for whatever reason the system is just not matching players with you in a lobby, which seems to happen occasionally on, definitely on the Nintendo Switch, but happens even more when you try to play this game on Xbox or PlayStation because of the lack of crossplay and cross saves, which you're going to be getting to later in this list. Having AI followers already ready to available to assist you, and you can just handle the hunt by yourself with the AI if you so choose. It doesn't get any more difficult, but eventually, players will join in. It scales back up. The health goes up, and then you are able to handle this with other players. I think that is a great addition, and I think followers are here to stay. I would love to see them come back. I think Capcom would be making a huge mistake if they don't bring followers back. Again, they also could make just more introductory characters. I mean, they sell figures and, you know, toys and plushies and all sorts of things of like Yomogi and stuff and all the characters from Rise and Sunbreak. So they have made these characters relevant and popular. So at the end of the day, I mean, Minoto and Noah, come on, like people love those two. So, you know, they sell t-shirts and stuff with them. So just making more memorable characters and let those characters be part of the story and also your single player adventure or online hunts would go a long way. Number 6 is switch skills, hunter arts, or hunter styles. And I would actually disagree with this one completely. While almost all guaranteed the wire bugs aren't coming back to the next Monster Hunter game, which would be a huge miss. Just like how the Clutch Claw stayed in Iceborne, switch skills should absolutely carry it over. Of course, it doesn't need to be the same exact system. Hunter arts or hunter style systems for Monster Hunter generations are arguably better and more complex than switch skills in many ways. As long as there are options for players to use the iconic Monster Hunter weapons in different ways to separate them from their peers who are using the same weapon. Now, for me personally, styles didn't really grab me. Hunter arts or hunter styles didn't really grab me, but I understood hunter styles, why they were, you know, providing a service. Switch skills for me don't do anything, but I'm a gunner, so I don't particularly care at the end of the day. Switch to blue scroll for LA or switch to red scroll for plus attack. There's really no benefits for me as a gunner, but I do understand that based on the weapon, you know, switch skills are valuable to some, but not all. Maybe they should balance that out, and maybe in the next mainline game they could actually do a better job implementing that, but at the end of the day, for me personally, they just don't do anything. Moving over to number 5, enjoyable map traversal options. Just like how the wire bug will likely stay in Monster Hunter Rise, so will Palamutes. And again, I completely disagree with that. Bring over Palamutes, God, please. Or at least very likely. Capcom has already shown that in previous Monster Hunter games that they like each mainline title to have its very own games, gimmicks, mechanics, with many of those new systems being exclusive to that game. But what does it need to move forward to the next mainline game iteration with this idea is having the system for getting around the map quickly and enjoyably. It doesn't have to be as convenient as Palamutes or as acrobatic as Wirebugs, but if they don't, players will immediately notice how much slower the game feels overall and compared to other titles. And this is why I cannot go back to play World or Iceborne at the end of the day for me personally. Without quick map traversal and maps getting bigger and bigger and bigger in each game, and we assume, God, I hope they don't do this, but if they make a mainline open world game and they don't have like a good traversal option, which I would assume that at the end of the day, they'll just give us mounts like they did in World. You know, I would expect them to do the lazy route and not do that, where Palamutes are a little bit more versatile. You know, hopefully they do something interesting. But Palamutes, man, they're just almost all around better than cats at the end of the day for me personally, and I would just love to see them come back. Number 4, they talk about in-depth room customization. Now, for me personally, this one would be much lower in the list. One of the areas that Monster Hunter Rise fell short is the room customization systems. While there is one in Rise, it really only amounted to hanging pictures on the walls and putting up statues on shelves. Think back to the diverse customizations that World and Iceborne had, where players could attach endemic life and display them in their rooms, change the overall visual theme of their room, and quickly become clear how bare bones the system is in Rise. Additionally, it would be nice if Capcom finally made it so that hub area or the area where online lobbies gather were customizable as well. That way, joining some random's lobby didn't feel and look exactly in the same every time, as players could feel the sense of ownership over the specific hub area. Now, one of the things that I've talked about already in multiple videos is that they sell you those like pre-purchasable songs, and you can like get them to play in your little town or back in the village, Kimura or Gato or whatever. But those songs are not playable in like whenever you go into a hunt or whatever. I think they could definitely play around with that option. Like if you already paid for the DLC and you bought those songs, maybe let them play in your hunt, so that when you invite other players can actually hear the songs that you purchased, and instead of just them only being playable to you, other players can have access to that as well. Just more minor changes. But when it comes to just room customization, for me personally, I don't care. I'm much more interested in hunter and your gear customization than just, making my room look better. And then I think we're going to be talking about that in a little bit. Number 3 on their list is crossplay and cross saves, and for me this one is number 1 bar none. Not even up for discussion. If the next mainline game does not have crossplay or cross saves, boy oh boy, they're gonna hear it from me, and I'm not gonna be the only one. This is the thing. I know every YouTube channel out there for Monster Hunter is gonna be talking about it, and every gamer out there who plays Monster Hunter and loves Monster Hunter is gonna be demanding this even further than they already have. They mentioned that the next feature is something that is going to take a lot of work for Capcom's end. It really shouldn't. It's already available on PlayStation and Xbox. They just need to make it available for everyone else to be able to have, you know, Nintendo Switch and Steam as well. Given that the crossplay is typically not something that companies like Xbox, Nintendo, and Sony want that much, including crossplay between two systems owned by different companies, is usually a bureaucratic nightmare that doesn't pan out. Again, we have plenty of examples already, much smaller indie games doing crossplay and cross saves. There's no reason why this specific company cannot get it done. Previous Monster Hunter games have had crossplay with games and even cross saves, especially between the original Ultimate versions of the games, so it would be amazing if Capcom managed to have those, or maybe even both, for their next installment. I will remind players that Generations Ultimate was a cross-play and cross-saves compatible from Nintendo Switch and 3DS. Now those were two Nintendo ecosystems. There's no reason why you can't have it from PlayStation and Xbox. We expect the next Mega Man game to just be PlayStation, Xbox, and PC until Nintendo reveals their next console, and then maybe Capcom will drop it at a later date, and maybe crossplay will be introduced then. But at this point, it's a non-negotiable for me, and hopefully it is for other players. It isn't for other players as well. Number 2, they mentioned expansive layered equipment systems. Quite frankly, this feature should be in every Monster Hunter game going forward. Capcom has done layered armor and layered weapons in previous Monster Hunter games, but it's either pretty limiting or excludes to certain elements or events quests. In Sunbreak and more Monster Hunter Rise, however, players gain the ability to create layered versions of just about every armor and weapon set after they unlock their ranks, higher rank for armor and master rank for weapons. And I think this should just be a gimme. It should just be a base feature that's included in every game. It shouldn't even be making something of a list like this. Now, Rise and Sunbreak did a fantastic job in introducing it, but of course, you know, the next mainline game should just have that by default. It's a fantastic feature. And number 1 in the Game Rant official list for Monster Hunter mechanics that need to return for Monster Hunter 6, World 2, or Paradise is unexpected quests and twists and scary monsters randomly appearing. That's very wordy, but essentially they say that. And lastly, let's talk about something that past games did but Monster Hunter World specially nailed, and those moments in the quest where you suddenly change due to the appearance of a new unknown monster or a monster way above the player's level will sprawl up randomly. And this happens in Rise and Sunbreak 2 as well. In Rise, players will often have hunts where elder dragons are roaming the map along with their intended targets, but during the story there's not really any moments where this happens. Imagine a version of Rise where during the fight with a Barroth in low rank, Magna Malu shows up out of nowhere, has a turf war with it, and destroys Barroth in less than a minute. How much scarier, and already quite scary, would the lead up to fighting Magna Malu would be in that example? Monster Hunter World has a few moments like this, such as the Rathalos popping up during that early Tobi-Kadachi fight before even introduced in a cutscene. These moments do a lot to make the player feel like an unkillable and unstoppable superhuman right out of the gates, so they can earn that feeling through more and more hunting experiences. I would push back and argue that quest when you're introduced to anomaly investigations in Sunbreak, where you have that dead Sonogre just kind of laying about, all these other corpses of all these other monsters just kind of laying about, and then you come through anomaly, I believe, what is it, a Luna Garen, I believe is that you end up fighting, and it's not really like a full fight. You just kind of take it down, I believe 10,000 health or so, and then you kind of get prompted to anomaly investigation hunts. That's a really awesome sequence that they did fantastically well. Geismagorn, that entire sequence of that fight, the way that it takes place, is fantastically well done, but people don't appreciate it because they only did it once and they didn't do it again. I mean, do I have to talk to you guys about Amatsu? How amazing that entire sequence and introduction is, how awesome that fight looks. Now, at the end of the day, some people complain about the wall, HP wall that fight ultimately ends up being, and whether the hazard version or not changes that, we don't necessarily know. There will be a hazard version that I spoke about in the leaks video not too long ago, but I mean, those things are all going to change. So for me personally, I do think Rise and Sunbreak did a little bit of what they're hoping for here, but of course I understand they're talking about thematically big set piece moments in the middle of a hunt where the game just cuts away, something happens, and then you're just like at all, you kind of put down your controller for a little bit and just see how things play out. And certainly them bringing more of those stronger monsters into the fold, showcasing what they're going to do. I mean, again, Apex and Ogre fighting Amatsu is completely out of nowhere. You don't expect, you know, that fight, the turf war to take place, but certainly it does. We expect, of course, the new Malzeno, I completely forgot his name already, you know, Primordial Malzeno, to go ahead and have one of those interesting fights as well. So, you know, again, awesome idea, but I think it's one of those thematically, you know, you can have it or lose it type of things that some players will appreciate while others not so much. But that's about all the information. I know this was an extremely long video, but I certainly wanted to cover it as best as possible. Huge shout out once again to Jacob H. Buckhalter for this Monster Hunter 10 mechanics that need to return to Monster Hunter 6 out of Game Rant. If you're brand new to my channel though, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, hit the bell to receive notifications when the videos go up, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See ya.